As we approach 2023 and the dust of he who shan't be named begins to settle, the virus-resultant otakus finally step outside and touch grass for the first time in years. The once budget build obsessed are still waiting on 6 group buys to ship that they have no intention of building, the once infamously out of stock alpaca is now sitting, and TX stabs are easy to get your hands on. Kind of. So what does that mean for the rest of us still in this godforsaken hobby? Mechanically breaking MX blacks and only run beige sets? Kind of a self-report there. Well, once you scrape the surface of the keyboard hobby and delve a little deeper, you start seeing trends. People clown on actual RGB, but love this organic RGB. Damn, another fat self-report. So today, let's explore a few keyboard facts that you probably haven't heard of. If you're new here and you like this kind of thing, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below. It's free and lets me know if you want to see more content like this. So with that, call to action out the way.
One life, baby.
Let's talk keyboards. If you scroll the deep depths of desk authority, you may come across this idea of dummy keyboard stabilizer switches. Honestly, I wish they actually logistically worked better than the traditional stabilizer and wire that we use today, because I think they look sick. They're traditionally used in vintage boards to stabilize bigger keys such as big ass enters or bay. These dummy stabilizers were basically switches with some of the internal key components ripped out, such as the spring. Aside from Cherry, boards like the early Model M's used dummy stabilizer shafts as a way to save money, and the early beam spring boards used a dummy switch on one side of the spacebar. Now, have you ever wondered why people use different switches on the spacebar as opposed to the rest of the keyboard? Shoobs may use the BCP for its objectively good spacebar sound, but this trend can actually be followed back to vintage boards. A number of different vintage boards actually did a similar thing using either different coloured or different spring weights for the spacebar switch. A number of vintage MX boards can be seen sporting cherrymx grey switches on the spacebar with the rest of the board filled out with cherrymx blacks. This trend can be seen heavily on the early Geek Hack days, as well as in this crusty old TVS Gold keyboard. Now, talking about switches, you may have heard of lock switches. In many vintage boards, not just Cherry, lock switches exist whereby when you press the key, it's locked in position until it's pressed again. Hot take time. Keyboard enthusiasts are actually just ballpoint pen enthusiasts with a bit more money. Changed my mind. Early Alps boards also had these, and their uses range from being used as a caps lock to having a physically locking function layer. I'm looking at you maniacs daily driving 40% keyboards. You know who you are. You know. The Cherry MX lock switch finished production in September 2015, with versions of the MX lock switch dating back to 1984. All black variants, black with white, and a grey top housing with black bottom housing are all variants that were produced. The grey top version seems to be the only one that's in the wild nowadays, with odd switches popping up on eBay, mech market posts, or through buying vintage high-rose boards. Now if we rise above switch facts, we move on to keycaps. Tsangan layout is very popular among keyboard enthusiasts, utilising a 7U spacebar and a symmetrical bottom row that looks great with the wing keyless boards that have been spewed out as of late. The origin story isn't particularly anything crazy, but more of an interesting fact, a result of a Geek Hack moderator called Tsangan religiously requesting the 7U spacebar support on key sets that were coming out, to the point where people started saying they were adding Tsangan layout support to their key sets. The layout was a shout out to vintage Cherry boards as well as the Korean customs that were very popular at the time. Less known apparently, and I say that because I didn't actually know this. The more standard bottom row kits were actually called Moogle Kits back in the early days of the forum, generally having 1.25 modifiers, standard width shifts, caps lock, and a 6.25 spacebar for use with the standard layout ANSI keyboards. But whatever they are, whichever you use, it doesn't matter because this is a hobby of preference. Unless you use a split spacebar. Talking about preference, do you like RGB? The RGB Modifier kit seems to be very popular right now, with both GMK and DCS sets running with these extended kits at the moment. What isn't as well known is that they actually originate from old Desco keyboards. These are often seen, or variations of, seen used by airline staff. Although nowadays they're used primarily for their aesthetics, back in the day they're originally used to make keyboard shortcuts easier to remember. The last fact, and arguably the most boring fact, I know, you didn't think it would get any more boring than coloured keycaps. Corsa sides. Ever heard this mentioned? Ever looked at every single one-off keyboard that gets produced and you see these things? Corsa sides, baby. On the opposite end of the spectrum to the ugly Corsas that are used to pick up underage girls from McDonald's, The Corsa side profile takes its name from the OTD 360 Corsa, the granddaddy of Korean customs and a grail to many in the hobby today. The board, along with the rest of the OTD lineup, are named after classic cars that the creator is obsessed with. The 360C was named after the Ferrari 360, with the Corsa representing the Rosso Corsa paint. Bet you didn't think my car analogy was going to line up, huh? So that's it for today. I hope that you learned something, and if you didn't, thanks for sticking around to the end and pleasing my algorithm overlords. Make sure to drop a sub down below and leave a like if you learned something. See you later, nerds.